Today we will be learning about how to find the perimeter and the area of rectangles and parallelograms. So first of all, what is perimeter and area? Just to review, perimeter is the distance around a figure. So it is the sum of the lengths of all of the line segments in a figure. Area is the measure of the square units that is contained within, on the interior of the figure. So we will go through both rectangles and parallelograms, which we know a rectangle is a type of parallelogram, just to remind you. All right, so we have a rectangle, just to let you know, remind you, two sets of parallel sides, and all of the angles are right angles. So the formula, first of all, for the perimeter. So we have a base and we have a height. The base was, you think the bottom, it could be any side. And then one of the sides that is intersecting with the base is called the height. So the perimeter is the distance around. So we know that these two are parallel and congruent, and these two are parallel and congruent. So we have two bases and two heights. Base plus height plus height. That's all of those. Or we could say 2 times the base plus 2 times the height. That is the perimeter. And the area, that means the amount of surface that this covers, is base times height. It's kind of like how you learn multiplication way back in 3rd grade. Okay, so for instance, if this rectangle had a base of 6 and a height of 4, what would the perimeter and area be? So the perimeter is the sum of all of the lengths of all the sides. 6 plus 4 plus 6 plus 4. So, and that equals 20 units. You could also do 2 times 6 plus 2 times 4. You will get the exact same answer. Then the area is base times height. Base is 6, height is 4, and that equals 24 square units. We have to make sure that we label it correctly, because area is a measure in 2 dimensions. Perimeter is in 1 dimension. It's just a length. Now we have a parallelogram. So a parallelogram, just to let you know, is 2 sets of parallel and congruent sides, just like a rectangle, but we don't have the right angles. So what we have a base, but then the height is not this. This is not the height of a parallelogram. The height of the parallelogram is if we drop a parallel line to the base. That is the height. Now, we might have another side here. Let's just call it X, for lack of better words. We have now perimeter. We have a base and 2 sides. So that's the sum of the sides. So base plus, we called it X plus X. Really, that's all it is. The area is still base times height. So we really only have to memorize one formula for the area of a parallelogram or rectangle or square or rhombus. So those are all the same formulas for the area and even for the perimeter. So let's do a problem. Let's say that the base is 7 and this side is 5. Okay, this side is 5. So if we had the perimeter of this particular parallelogram, we have 7 plus 5 plus 7 plus 5. That's the distance all the way around. And that would equal 24 units. happens in the same parallelogram, let's just say, for instance, that the height is 4. If that height happens to be 4, the area is simply base times height, which is 7 times 4, which is 28 squared units. So that's the thing we have to really be careful about in parallelograms that are not rectangles. The height is not necessarily the length of this side. Now, lastly, I want to go through composite figures. Now, composite figures are kind of like lots of other figures kind of smushed together, and we may have to find perimeters and areas of this. So I drew a very simple one, and I gave you some measurements here. And I'm going to tell you that, yes, all of these are right angles, so we don't have to worry about that. So how are we going to figure this out? We're going to start splitting this shape, this composite figure, up into familiar ones. So I look like I continue that line down. I have a rectangle here and a rectangle here. So now I have to kind of figure out, if I just look at this rectangle here, I have a 7 by 5. This is also 5. This whole area is 7. Then I have this rectangle also. So now, what are my measurements here? Well, I know that if this whole thing is 7 and this small thing is 3, this dotted line has to be 4. This 3 plus 4 has to equal 7. And I know that the parallel, line segments are congruent. Therefore, this is also 4. Now I have to figure out what these two sides are. So if I know that this whole thing is 8 and this part is 5, this part is 3, and this part is 3. So now I can start to calculate my perimeter and area of this whole figure. So the perimeter is simply the sum of all the sides. So we have to figure out where we're going to start, and then we're make sure we add all of the sides. So let's start on here. We have 7 plus 8 plus 4 plus 3 plus 3 plus 5. So I added up all of the sides of that. Don't add this dotted line here. That we just used to figure out some of those exterior lengths. So if we start adding all this together, we have 15 plus 10 is 25 plus 5 is 30 units. Now let's look at the area. The area is the sum of the two areas we have here. So here we have a rectangle, and it is 5 by 7. So 7 times 5. And then we're going to add to it the area of the small one, which is 3 times 4. If I do that math, 35 plus 12, that's 47 square units. If this were centimeters, it would be squared centimeters. If it were feet, squared feet. That is how you find and use the perimeter and area of rectangles and parallelograms.